On behalf of AMVETS Post 7, welcome to today's Pearl Harbor Remembrance program. My name is Mike Hurt. I'll be your Master of Ceremonies. It was a beautiful, beautiful Sunday morning. A gentle ocean breeze. It rolled through. The pace, kind of slow. Some sailors were eating breakfast. Some slept. Yet others completed their prescribed work duties. The place was the American Naval Base at Pearl Harbor, near Honolulu, Hawaii. The time was 7:55 a.m., and the date was December 7th, 1941. Unbeknownst, the United States of America would be soon forced on the road to war. The planes of Imperial Japan soon filled the skies over Pearl Harbor. Bullets and bombs rained havoc down upon the ships. In all, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor crippled or destroyed 18 American ships and nearly 300 airplanes. Dry docks and airfields were targeted as well. Names such as the USS California, USS Oklahoma, USS West Virginia, USS Utah, USS Maryland, USS Pennsylvania, and the USS Arizona. Their names will be forever seared within our memory. It's estimated over 2,400 people died, and well over thousands were wounded. Over 200 Wisconsinites were present that day, and 56 were killed. Let's bring it a little closer to home. 3 local service members made that ultimate sacrifice. Gunner's Mate 3rd Class Raymond Nusser, United States Navy, USS Arizona, and Ship's Cook 2nd Class William Udes, United States Navy, and Douglas Dykoff, Signalman 1st Class United States Navy, both assigned to the USS Utah. On this anniversary date of December 7th, 2023, the 82nd anniversary, let us gather today as a community to reflect, to ponder, to pray, and to honor the sacrifice of all those who served that fateful day of December 7th, 1941. At this time, I will ask Chaplain Marcia Formiller, Chaplain for AMVETS Post 7 Auxiliary, if she could please provide the invocation. Please stand if you're able and uncover it, and let us bow our heads. Chaplain Formiller.
Dear Father, on this annual recognition of the Pearl Harbor tragedy, we pray for thy benign blessings and guidance. Enable us to reflect clearly and conscientiously upon our priceless heritage. Let us be determined to guard and to preserve it through all trials and difficulties.
Thank you so much, Chaplain Formilla. At this time, we're blessed Frankie Moscato, actress, singer, songwriter, past American Idol ticket winner, will now lead us in the Star-Spangled Banner. Remember, we will give veterans, we'll give a hand salute.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Two. Oh, thank you so much, Frank. Ron Griffin, AMVET's second state vice commander, will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Special mention that Ron is a U.S. Army Vietnam veteran. And Ron, where are you? Ah, there you are. Yeah.
And salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two.
Thank you so much, Ron. At this time, we will have the laying of the wreath to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Laying the wreath is Ellen Schmidt, AMVET's Post 7 Auxiliary President, and Jeff Bedward, AMVET's Post 7 Commander. And salute. Two. Thank you so much, Commander Bedward and Commander Schmidt. Frankie will now sing Remember Pearl Harbor. Yeah, everybody just sit.
History in every century recalls an act that lives forevermore. We'll recall as into line we fall the thing that happened on Hawaii's shore. Let's remember Pearl Harbor as we go to meet the foe. Let's remember Pearl Harbor as we did the Alamo. We will always remember how they died for liberty. Let's remember Pearl Harbor and go on to victory. Let's remember Pearl Harbor as we go to meet the foe. Let's remember Pearl Harbor as we did the Alamo. We will always remember how they died for liberty. Let's remember Pearl Harbor and go on to victory.
Our guest speaker is Christopher L. Kolakowski. I come from Rakowski's, so.
There you go.
So, yeah. So. He serves as the executive director at the Wisconsin Veterans Museum in Madison. And take a look at his bio in the back of the bulletin. He has an extensive history, background in American history, whether engaged in preservation of American history. He's published 6 books, and 3 of them were on the Pacific in World War II. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, let's give a warm round of applause to our main speaker, Chris Kolakowski.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here this morning, and thank you all for coming out this morning to remember this very important day. There are certain days in American history, to echo Frankie's song, there are certain days in American history that resonate longer and louder than others. And December 7th, 1941 ranks up there. I would put it very close, if not on par, with July 4th, 1776, September 11th, 2001, and many others as well. That might be a whole debate we have sometime when I come back over a couple of beers downtown or something. I don't know. Pearl Harbor is a very well-known story. I know in a crowd like this, it's very well known. It, of course, is the day that the United States was dragged into the Second World War, officially. Although I will point out that Americans had been fighting in various countries' armed forces before that. As a matter of fact, the first Badger we found, the first Wisconsin-connected service member we found killed in World War II, died on Christmas Eve, 1940, serving with a New Zealand unit in North Africa. That's a whole talk for a whole other time. In the U.S. military, of the 16 million people that served in the Second World War, 330,000 of them were from Wisconsin, of whom 8,000 lost their lives, killed, wounded, captured, or missing as casualties. In short, this was a national mobilization and a national effort on a scale very seldom seen in American history. And it started with the events 82 years ago today. What I want to do in the time that I have is I want to offer some stories and I want to reflect on why this day matters. Why are we here 82 years? Why does this continue to resonate? And what are we about? But before we get into that, Mike already talked a little bit about this, and we didn't coordinate our remarks, but it fits really well. I want to start with one of the things that we at the Veterans Museum always teach. We teach 3 things. We teach every veteran is a story, Wisconsin was there, and this still matters. And we're going to look at the last 2 in this talk that I have. First thing is, people think about all these great historical events. They don't always realize that many of them have Wisconsin connections. And Pearl Harbor is a fantastic example of that. Did you know 2 of the 16 Medal of Honor recipients for actions on December 7th, 1941 were from Milwaukee? One of them, Franklin Van Valkenburg, who we'll be honoring here very shortly. The other one being Cassin Young, who happened to command USS Vestal and happened to be right next door to Arizona. And when Arizona blew up, it blew him overboard, and he swam back to his ship and resumed command, despite his wounds. So Wisconsin was there. Wisconsin was doing her duty. Wisconsin was also suffering casualties almost from the first minute of U.S. entry into World War II. And I want to share some of those stories with you and just give you a few stories, particularly from this region of Wisconsin, just to give you an idea of the breadth of where Wisconsin was on December 7th, 1941 in Oahu. First, let's zero in on the lead ship, actually the flagship of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, or of the battleship, I should say, the battleship row, all those formations there, was USS California. It was the flagship of the battleship commander, William Pye, who happened to be off the ship that day. And there are 2 notable Wisconsin connections I want to highlight this morning. The first one is directly related, and many of you probably knew him, directly related to somebody here in the Fox Valley, Clyde Stapleton, who was part of the Marine detachment that day. And California is credited with shooting down at least 3, maybe more. If you ask them, it's more. If you ask others, it's fewer. But they're credited with shooting down quite a few Japanese planes, particularly during the second wave. And the way that those Marines were able to get the anti-aircraft guns into action is pretty impressive, especially when you consider that California, one of the reasons that California sinks because of relatively light damage is she had been preparing for an inspection the next morning on December 8th. So all the portholes were open, everything was being scrubbed, the ship was all set up. It was not fit for defense. That usually doesn't happen when I'm inside, but hey. The other thing I want to mention as well is the executive officer of California was also from Milwaukee, Earl Stone. How many of you have been to Norfolk, Virginia, and have visited USS Wisconsin, the BB-64, that's anchored in Wisconsin, now anchored in a museum ship in Norfolk? Besides me, I used to live there. Okay, he was the first commander of BB-64. That'll win you a bar bet one day. But he was the executive officer of California and was the one who took command of the ship and directed the defense of the ship until Admiral Pye was able to arrive. But that's right there. When you look at the Battleship Row, USS California is the one that's by herself at the very beginning of Battleship Row. One of the other ones I want to talk about, I want to emphasize, when you hear the names, 55 names, 56 names, they can blur together sometimes, or they can sometimes be just names. But I want to put 3 names. And if you want to learn more about these 3, you can come and visit us and see our display on the Badgers at the Day of Infamy that we have at the Veterans Museum. I'm talking about the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th names that you are going to hear very shortly. Malcolm Leroy and Randolph Barber of New London, Wisconsin. They were 3 brothers who all joined before the war. As a matter of fact, you'll find a lot of Wisconsinites, you'll find a lot of people from other states as well. Late years of the Depression, get out of high school, not a lot of economic prospects, they end up in the military. And that's why you see a lot of these young guys coming off the farm and coming out of towns like New London and many others that end up serving and end up being there. And many of them end up being casualties on December 7th. These 3 joined and were serving together. They are Wisconsin's equivalent of the Sullivans, if you're familiar with the 5 brothers. Their father had been petitioning the Navy to get them away from serving together. He didn't want them all serving together, didn't want them all tempting fate. He must have had a premonition, because they are aboard USS Oklahoma on December 7th. And if you look at their ratings, you'll realize they were down in the engineering spaces, and they were berthed in the bowels of the ship. So when Oklahoma takes those multiple torpedoes and begins to roll over, well, I will leave the rest of that to your imagination. 429 men died aboard Oklahoma on that day and then the days after, because they weren't able to get to them after she turned turtle. 388 were unknown. They were buried in the punch bowl. Fortunately, the Department of Defense, and we work closely, by the way, with the University of Wisconsin and their efforts in this regard as well, have undertaken a sacred mission to find and identify as many of these MIAs as they can and bring them that final step home. And they were able to identify the Barbers in June of 2021, and they were buried back home in New London on September 11th, 2021. Some of you may have attended the ceremony. But that's a tremendous thing. They've able to identify, of those 388 missing in action and unidentified from Oklahoma, they are down below 29 that are still unidentified. It's a tremendous thing that the Department of Defense and the United States government has done. Keeping faith. We talk about we'll never leave a man behind. And this is an example even 8 decades later. We're trying to bring these people home. And the Barbers are exemplars of that, but there are others. In fact, some of the other names that will be read from USS Oklahoma have also come home as part of that effort, as have some of the other names on here as well that have been listed as missing in action. You go to the Veterans Museum, and actually if you read our blog about them on the website, there are 2 things I want to share with you about the Barbers that illustrate the fact that what happened on December 7th didn't just affect Oahu. It rippled across the country and it rippled across this state. Because the Barbers got the telegram, the Barber family got the telegram in New London just before Christmas 1941 that these 3 boys were missing and presumed dead. And then they got a package in the mail that was postmarked December 5th, 1941 from Honolulu, Hawaii. And it was the 3 boys who had had a picture taken in front of Pacific Fleet headquarters and sent it home as a Christmas present. We have that picture. You can find it in our online collections and our online blog. And you can see 3 guys, 22, 20, 21, looking like you would at peacetime. right? It's being stationed in paradise, as some of the others said. And they had about 48 hours to live. I use them as exemplars for many other stories, some of whom we're going to be honoring today. But when you consider, the number, 2,403 killed, each one of them is a story, just like the Barbers, and each one of them had a ripple effect across this country and across this state, just like the Barbers. The last story I want to share this morning, just real quick, this is another one you can find if you come down and visit us, we shouldn't ever forget as well that it's easy for Pearl Harbor to be a Navy story, and yes it is, don't get me wrong, but it's also an Army and an Air Force story. And we have a tremendous story in our collection from a woman from Manitowoc, Rhoda Ziesler, who was an Army nurse stationed at Schofield Barracks. And she had been there a month. And she actually writes home and talks about what a great place Hawaii is. She's never seen anything quite like it. And is just having a ball and having the time of her life. She's 21, 23, somewhere in there. December 7th, 1941, she comes out of her barracks and sees planes overhead. And wow, this is a really, really realistic training exercise. Matter of fact, they've even painted Japanese markings on the planes. It's not until the second wave arrives, because remember, the first wave of the Japanese attack focused specifically on the harbor and the battleships. The second wave started to attack some of the other installations around the island, including Schofield Barracks. And when that happened, it was no drill. And then the casualties started to arrive. She worked for 2 days straight. And the last thing she did was they put a smock over her bloody uniform. They went out, they commemorated those that had not made it and buried them in the post cemetery temporarily. They said, no cameras, this is classified, we're classifying battle damage. Being the good soldier that she was, she found a way to smuggle a camera there, and we have a photograph of her standing there after the ceremony next to the graves. She then went back and wrote 3 solid pages in her diary, stream of consciousness, getting out what had happened the last 48 hours. We have that diary. If you want to read it, it's available at the museum. You can also send me an email and we can send you the transcript as well. It is a tremendous example of a Wisconsin woman dealing with the shock and trauma of the first 48 hours of World War II. Wisconsin was there. Wisconsin was there all over Oahu on that day. Now, I do want to add, just in the little bit the time that I have left, I do want to make a couple of contextual comments and a couple of comments about why this matters, and also give you a little bit of an insight into a great miscalculation that the Japanese made. Now, you may be wondering, why did the Japanese think that it was a good idea to start a war with a sneak attack, right? Well, they had done it before, and it had worked. In 1904, go ask Google about the Battle of Port Arthur during the Russo-Japanese War. They struck the Russian fleet at Port Arthur, knocked the Russians back on their heels, and they never really fully recovered from that surprise attack. And a year and a half later, Tsar Nicholas II sued for peace. That is essentially the model that they're predicting is going to happen to the United States. But the miscalculation, they didn't understand the rage, and they didn't understand the national sense of purpose that was engendered by Pearl Harbor. Remember Pearl Harbor, the battle cry. You've probably seen some of the posters. Avenge December 7th. That's the spirit of it. And when you consider what the United States did during World War II, we sent most of our army to Europe. We sent a third of our army to the Pacific. We sent all the Marines. We sent the majority of our fleet to the Pacific. Japan was actually the secondary theater, the secondary target. Germany first. Germany was the main target. But when you consider what we did to the Japanese while simultaneously fighting the Germans and simultaneously through Lend-Lease keeping China, Russia, and some of our other allies in the war, it is stupendous. And it is something that we should always, always remember. The Japanese didn't count on that. And by the end of the war, Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox had proven prophetic when he had said at the beginning of the war to the Japanese ambassador, "We will break your empire before this is through." He had broken their empire. What the World War II generation did is make the world that we live in and have lived in for the last 82 years. If you want to look around the world, I did a whole presentation on this at one point. I looked at all the places around the world where 1945 is yesterday, how World War II and its aftermath and World War II and its memory remains a geopolitical influence on the world today. In fact, if you look at most of the conflicts, particularly in Asia, since 1945, virtually all of them have their roots in World War II and its immediate aftermath. Vietnam and Korea heading the list, but partition of India and the India-Pakistan conflict, the Pacific Cold War, many others as well. I could do a whole presentation on that too, Mike. But the point is, that's what makes this day so important. This is where that process started. This is where the foundation of the modern world, the end of the colonial empires, the independence for so many nations, freedom for so many millions of people, the U.S. victory and all that that has meant for the last 80 years. This is where that started. It was on that Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941 in Honolulu, Hawaii. And not to put too fine a point on it, you may notice from my biography, I'm involved in some think tanks involved in the Pacific Theater today, and we are looking at the late 1930s and early 1940s as examples of how not to react to rising Asian powers. And I will let you unpack that further. Think about that further if you wish. So, as we think about this day, and as we go from this day, as we go out and we consider and continue to go forward, these are the legacies and the lessons of December 7th, 1941. It truly is, as the first draft of Franklin Roosevelt's famous speech said, a date which will live in world history. Most people don't know that. It's Roosevelt who saw that draft and said it's a date that will live in infamy, which I think is a better description. But the original description is not incorrect also. It is a date that lives in American history and in world history. And if you want to look at its legacy, if you want to look at the legacy of World War II, all you have to do is look around us, because that's the world that we live in. They made the world that we live in today. And we should always remember that. And we should always honor what they have done. And I will leave you with an epitaph from a battlefield of World War II in India. And to me, it is the charge of all veterans from all conflicts, especially World War II, but of all conflicts, to us today. When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. Thank you very much.
I thought I got one. So, at this time, we are going to be reading the names of those Wisconsinites that were killed at Pearl Harbor, along with the tolling of the bell. This will be conducted by Kevin Gunderson, commander of AMVET's 4th District, and we also have students from Valley Christian School that will be reading the names. They are members of the football team, so don't mess with them. And again, let us remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Leave back to you.
Leo Dever Amundsen, Private, Marine Corps, USS Arizona. Leroy Kenneth Barber, Fireman, First Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Malcolm John Barber, Fireman, First Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Randolph Harold Barber, Fireman, Second Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Walter Robert Buval, Aviation Mechanists, Mate, Second Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Lawrence Atten Boxrucker, Fireman, Second Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. William G. Brucewitz, Seaman, First Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Robert P. Buss, Jr., Corporal, Army, Wheeler Field. Malachi J. Cashin, Corporal, Army, Wheeler Field. Keith Richard Conley, Hospital Apprentice, First Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Gerald Clinton Cox, Musician, Second Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Lyle Carl Curtis, Radioman, Second Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Frederick Curtis Davis, Ensign, Navy Reserve, USS Nevada. Douglas R. Dickoff, Singleman, Third Class, Navy, USS Utah. Thank you.
Kenneth E. Durenenberg, Fireman, First Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Elmer Edwin Dreffel, Corporal, Marine Corps, USS Oklahoma. Casper Elhert, Singleman, Third Class, Navy, USS Utah. Arnold E. Field, Private, Army, Hickman Field. Leslie Henry Fisher, Seaman, First Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Lawrence Henry Funk, Seaman, First Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Philip Robert Gazecki, Ensign, Navy Reserve, USS Arizona. Marvin Frederick Giese, Seaman, First Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Harvey Ralph Hansen, Seaman, First Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Helmer Ansel Hansen, Seaman, Second Class, Navy, USS California. Alfred Grant Heath, Seaman, First Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Paul Edward Herrick, Private, Marine Corps, USS Arizona. Darrell Miller Hess, Fireman, Fire Controlman, First Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Fred Albert Hilt, Machinist Mate, First Class, Navy, USS West Virginia.
David William Jackson, Ensign, Navy Reserve, USS Utah. William Arthur Hudes, Ship's Cook, Second Class, Navy, USS Utah. Joseph Nicholas Carabin, Fireman, First Class, Navy, USS Utah. Roderick Otto Klubertons, Private, Army, Hickam Field. Harry Wellington Kramer, Fireman, First Class, Navy, USS California. Neil Stanley Lewison, Fireman, Third Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Charles Harris Matheson, Seaman, First Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Vernon Murford Matney, Fireman, First Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Herbert E. McLaughlin, Private, Army, Hickam Field. Joseph Alexander Muofsky, Radioman, Third Class, Navy, USS Pennsylvania. George Eugene Nagel, Seaman, First Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Laxton Gale Newman, Aviation Machinist, Mate, Third Class, Navy, Canoe, NAS. Frank Edward Nicholas, Fireman, First Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Raymond Alfred Nusser, Gunner's Mate, Third Class, Navy, USS Arizona.
Thomas F. Lipsky, Private First Class, Army, Hickam Field. Donald D. Plant, Private, Army, Wheeler Field. Alexander J. Prisbiz, Printer 2nd Class, Navy, USS California. David Joseph Riley, Seaman 2nd Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Halver E. Rognus, Private, Army, Hickam Field. Robert R. Shattuck, Private First Class, Army, Wheeler Field. Edward Frank Zergott, Storekeeper 3rd Class, Navy, USS California. Arthur Ray Thines, Seaman 2nd Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. Ralph Egbert Tuttle, Fireman 2nd Class, Navy, Midway Island, NAS. Andrew Curtis Uhrenholt, Ensign, Navy Reserve, USS Arizona. Franklin Van Valkenburg, Captain, Navy, USS Arizona. Robert N. Wakowiak, Fireman 3rd Class, Navy, USS Oklahoma. James Frank Wallace, Seaman 1st Class, Navy, USS Arizona. Earl Delbert Wallen, Private 1st Class, Marine Corps, USS California.
Thank you so much. That it just hits your heart. It really does. And thank you so much, Commander Captain. At this time, Chaplain Formiller will provide the benediction. Stand if you're able. Please uncover and bow your head. Chaplain Marshall.
O God, our Father, we guard in our hearts today the sacred memory of all those who gave their lives on that day which will live in infamy. Bless us, O Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chaplain Formula. The United Veterans Honor Guard, led by Commander Norm Schutz, will conduct the rifle salute, and then Kent Walker will also be doing the taps. One. Two. Okay. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt stated the day after Pearl Harbor, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. 82 years later, today in 2023, we still view the attack on Pearl Harbor as a critical turning point in the history of our nation. It was a true gut check. It was a gut check into the character of our country. What we have learned is that the American people have a strong sense of fairness and morality. However, when provoked, this nation has an iron resolve and a tenacity that is unmatched around the world. The lesson of Pearl Harbor is that of eternal vigilance. We cannot ever think the impossible cannot occur, and we can never underestimate our enemies. However, despite the horror and despite the darkness of that day, we pushed forward into a future and further solidified ourselves as a nation. It demonstrated the clarity of our light, the dignity, the courage, and the power of the American people. To the modern day revisionists of American history who believe that the atomic bomb never should have been dropped at Hiroshima by the U.S., I say this to you. Without a Pearl Harbor, there never would have been a Hiroshima. We did not start this war, but through the heroism of our American armed forces and our courageous World War II veterans, we sure ended it. In closing, I'd like to thank AMVETS Post 7 for sponsoring today's event, the Elks Lodge for allowing us to host it, Kent Walker for providing taps, and the United Veterans Organization for the rifle salute. Christopher Kolakowski for a superb and touching speech, and Frankie Moscata for leading us in song. Also, all the programs you got today, Park and Print donated those, free of charge. And also to the incredible students at Valley Christian School. Your presence today means so much. As an older generation, to see young faces here today, remembering December 7th, 1941 is huge. And I look at the four of you right now, you gotta keep the torch going. You gotta keep the story going. You know, someday we'll all pass, and we look toward you as keeping that remembrance. And lastly, thanking each one of...
You were supposed to do Frank.
Oh, Frankie, oh! Doggone, I'm getting, okay. Well, hey, thank you. I don't follow my own program. Okay. I got gigs. But I'll tell you what, I can't do 20 push-ups anymore. So before we go, God bless America, Frankie Moscato, actress, singer, songwriter, Oshkosh's daughter. Everybody's like smiling at me.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
And lastly, thank you for being here today. You being here, this is important. You honor them. You honor those folks. You ensure the memory of the sacrifice lives on. So, this concludes today's program. Now there are refreshments in the back. And everybody, please stay safe and may God bless America.